In this video, we're going to be talking a little bit more about containers in HTML and using them for layout and styles. So I've started this very simple HTML sheet, so go ahead and do that. So you just have your HTML, your head, your body, and pretty much nothing in it except for a title that says News Today. And also here I have a web page that I have just made, and it is going to be our example. And we're going to pretend that we've been, given this, and we have to recreate it. So we're going to think about how we would want to write our code in order to make this possible. So what we're going to do first is probably just enter all of the content. So if I'm back on my page right here, you can see that this is probably a header in, for example, probably an H1. So I'm going to put H1 and then I'm going to put news today and H1 and save that. And then this is the page that I'm actually working on. And so I'd have news today now. I'm going to go back to this, and that looks like another heading, but just a bit smaller. So I'll put that in H3, everything you need to know, and end my H3. Save that, go back here, refresh, got that. And then I have sort of a bunch of stuff down here. So I noticed that I've got an image and kind of this article here and another image here and an article here. And I have this blue background here. So I'm going to just start by entering all of the pieces of content, and then we're going to work on formatting it. So the first thing I see here is this rocket image. And you can get these images by going to mediawebtools.com/class-images. I'll put this here so you can see it. So mediawebtools.com/class-images. So you can just go ahead and type that into your browser, and you will go here and you can download all of those files if you would like to use them and follow along. Okay, so I've got this rocket image here, and what I did is the same thing as I did in the other videos, and that is that I have them in my website folder, in my images folder, and then I have my images here. And so in order to pull them up on my sheet, I'm going to do the image tag, and then the source will equal images, and in this case rocket.jpg. And I noticed that after that there's a paragraph. And so I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Since you watching the video do not have access to this, just go ahead and put in some fake content, whether you want to generate some lorem ipsum of your own, or if you just want to type in kind of a bunch of nonsense, that's fine. So I'm going to paste it in here, save it. And then I'm going to put in my other image, this little alien guy over here. So my source is images/alien.jpg. And then I'm going to put that paragraph. And you can see that after I put this paragraph in, that's actually all the content that I have. So now it's just a matter of putting that content in the right format in order for it to appear like this. So if I go back to the page that I'm actually working on, you can see that I have all this content, I have those images and those paragraphs, but they don't look exactly like this. So I'm looking at this page and I'm thinking, okay, one of my containers is probably this top part because it takes up the whole top here. So let's go ahead and put this section. We'll start a container here, and then we'll end it here, because then after that H3, it looks like everything kind of there. It starts again. There's new things there. So you can see that I started a div, ended a div. I like to tab in my what's ever inside the container, because then I can see that, okay, these two things are inside this container, and it just makes it a lot easier. So once I save this, nothing is actually going to happen yet. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh. Nope, nothing happened yet, because all we did is just put these two things in their own container. Now we can go ahead and we can apply some style to this. So we can see that this H1 is white text and a gray background. And this H3 is not. So instead of styling, we're not going to style this entire container, because we don't want everything in that container to be different. We just want this first heading. So we're going to put in style. As a reminder, this is inline style. So normally we do a style sheet, but we haven't gotten to that in the class yet. And so when you have a style that you're putting in, you're going to enter the property. So in this case, it would be the background color. And then you're going to enter the value, which is gray. And then you're going to end that with a semicolon. You're always going to want to put a semicolon after every style. So you can also see that that font is white. So we're going to change the color to white. Also put a semicolon after that. Save it. And then when we go back to the page we're working on and refresh, you can see that it is white text with a gray background. So we're looking a lot like this one. Okay, so now it's getting a little trickier because we've got a rocket here and we've got a rocket here, but it's a lot smaller. So there are some ways that you can figure out how big this is, and one of them is the inspector in Chrome. So if you're using Chrome and you right click and then you click inspect element, you'll see this image and you'll see that it is 100 pixels, okay? So actually you see a lot of information in here, so that is a good way to find information about a site if you're trying to get information about the code. But for now we can just see that, hey, if we hover over this, we can see that it's 100 pixels. So let's go ahead and we'll get rid of this inspector. We can put some style on that image. So we'll do style equals quote, and then the width of the image is 100 pixels. Now you might be wondering, oh, do I have to put in the height too? Well, no, you don't have to put in the height, because the width, if you just put in the width, that will make the height the same proportion as when it was a large image. So if, for example, you did put in the height, but you got it wrong, so maybe you thought the height would be about 200 pixels, let's just say you're bad at estimating. Now when we go to this, we've got a skewed rocket. It doesn't look the same anymore. But if we take away this height, it's going to get the width and be like, okay, I'm going to have it this width, and then I'm going to make it, I'm going to scale it down. So it's going to be proportional to the first image. So now when I refresh, I've got a rocket that is smaller, but still in the same proportions as my original rocket. So I want to do the same thing with this image here. And you can see that they're the same size. And if we go ahead and inspect this element, we're going to find out that, hey, yep, it's 110 pixels wide. And you'll see that this one is actually 110 pixels tall. So it'll be a little bit taller than the other image. So we're going to go into this image and give that a style. Style equals width 100 pixels. Okay, now you may remember from the video that we previously had that the way to get an image to have, things surrounding it, to have text, for example, surrounding it, which this one does, is to float it, because right now our rocket ship is taking up this whole space here. But if we instead float it, then this text will be allowed to fill in the empty space. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll put it in the style and we're going to float it to the left. And you can see that now the text surrounds the image. So now we're looking even better. But we can see that actually we have an entire section on the left and another entire section on the right. So what we're going to want to do is we can see that these containers contain both an image and a paragraph. It contains an image and a paragraph. And so we're going to break those into their own containers. So let's go ahead and starting with this image, we'll start a container and then we'll end it. And again, I like to kind of indent mine so that I can see what is in my container. And then we'll do the same thing here. And then we're going to end it. And go ahead and indent it to keep your formatting nice and legible. Okay, so we go back to this and we can see that nothing has actually happened. We've just put them in containers. But we do see that these have different properties. So this one has a border, this one also has a border, and this one is on the left side and this one's on the right side. But another thing you might notice here is that there's a blue background just containing these two containers. So we know that we need another container that is around both of these, okay? So what we're going to do is we need a container around these two containers. So above here, I'm going to go ahead and start a container. And then after the end of the second container, I am going to end it. And then I'm going to go ahead and take everything that's in here and indent it so I can see that this container contains this container and it contains this container. Now, if you want to code nicely, what you'll probably do is comment your code. So right here, I would put something about this being the end of main div. But you usually do that when you have an ID or class on the main div. So this div, you can see because of our indenting, starts here. So I might have an ID on here, and don't really worry about this yet because an ID is put there for the purposes of CSS. But let's just say we called this main. Then if I was wondering where this main container ended, I would see that it ended here. And so you can see that this is how you do a comment. So it starts off with this less than sign, the exclamation point, and a couple of dashes, and then ends with a couple of dashes and the greater than sign. So that comment will show up in your code, but it will not show up in on your page. So, when I refresh this, I don't have a comment here that says end of main div. This is a comment because it does not appear in the code. Okay, so now we have a container surrounding both of these, and we'll notice that container, first of all, doesn't just end right after these two containers. It goes on for a little bit, so we need to know how high it is. So you might inspect it again with the Chrome element. There are also tools, like this tool is called Measure It, and you can use that to measure, you would just click and drag. So you can look for Chrome extensions or other tools. But we can see that this is 500 pixels. And that contains, our two containers. So it's 500 pixels. So if you were, if this weren't a web page that you were replicating, if it were like a PDF, not a PDF, a PSD, a Photoshop document, then you would just go in Photoshop and click this element and see how big it was. You wouldn't inspect the element, or you'd click this image and check that image properties and see, oh, it's 100 pixels wide. Okay, now I know that. But this is just something I made using HTML, so that's why we can do the inspector. But if this were a Photoshop file, you would not be able to use that inspector because it wouldn't be an HTML file, it wouldn't be a web page. So you would have this open in Photoshop, which that is actually going to be an assignment of yours coming up, and then you in Photoshop, you would click on this and be like, okay, let's see how tall this blue box is. And then we will apply that to our code. So in this case, we could add some style here. So we've just seen that it is, the height is 500 pixels. And we also see that the background color is blue. So let's go ahead and, yep, now we've got blue around our containers here. So one thing, however, is that the background here and here remain white. So we're going to want to change that for each of these containers within the main container. So style equals background color white. Now, oops, that's an equal sign actually. So copy this, and then you can go ahead and put it on this other container. So now we're getting pretty close. When we refresh it, we have them in white, but we still don't have one container on one side and one container on the other side. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on getting this container on one side, and we can go into the style, and what we want to do is just like we did with the image, we want to float it left, and then you can probably guess what we do with this guy is that we float him right. Save that, refresh, and you're like, oh, what happened? It didn't work. Well, it did work. The thing that happened is this is floating left and this is floating right, but we haven't set a width on this. So we want to see how big this is. So again, you would do your inspector, but I can just tell you that both of these are 250 pixels. So we can go ahead and put a width of 250 pixels, and we'll go ahead and copy that onto this one as well. Save it and refresh it, and we're super, super close. You can just see that the one thing we're missing is a border on this, and then also a border on this. So we're gonna go this, you can see it's a black solid border. We don't know how wide it is, but in this case, if we were in Photoshop, we would just click on the element and find out. In this case, we could find out by inspecting the element, or we could, kind of take a guess. You'll get pretty good at guessing how many pixels something is. This happens to be 5 pixels, but if we were, for example, to say, over back here on our code, border 3 pixels, solid black, and go to the page that we're working on. Okay, you can see that that's a little bit thinner than that. So you can just kind of guess and then check a little bit. And then we'll put that also on this in the style. Just copied it and pasted it because it's the same exact thing. And then we're going to refresh it. And we've got 2 identical pages. So now you kind of see how you would want to go about planning out your website. And even if you're not using a Photoshop file, if you're just using maybe a sketch that you did, this is how you would go about in a very simple way. Obviously, this is a very, very simple site page, but that is how you would go about formatting your page.